Big news, everyone. DK Metcalf and Davante Adams are off the market, and the Chargers didn't make a move either. Fans were hoping for something big, but now it's time to take a closer look at what this means for the team. Let's break it down. What's up, Chargers fans? Welcome to the NFL Playbook Chargers. If you're new here, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. This channel is all about breaking down everything you need to know about the Bolts. First off, during a hectic free agency period, the Seahawks traded DK Metcalf to the Steelers in exchange for a 2025 second-round pick. Along with the trade, Metcalf secured a 5-year, $150 million extension, averaging $30 million per year, which places him among the top 5 or 6 highest-paid wide receivers in the league. Earlier, we saw Davante Adams sign a 2-year, $46 million deal with the Rams. That's an average of $23 million per year, ranking him around 17th or 18th among wide receivers based on salary. With both Metcalf and Adams off the table, fans are left wondering what could have been. For those who had these two players at the top of their wish lists, it's easy to understand the disappointment. Adams' situation in particular feels like a bigger letdown. Not only did he stay in Los Angeles, but he'll also be playing in the same stadium, just not for the Chargers. Adams had the flexibility to choose his destination, and unfortunately, the Chargers weren't his pick. As for Metcalf, his move largely hinged on which team could provide Seattle with the best offer in terms of draft picks and contract. The Steelers delivered on both fronts, so it's not entirely shocking. Still, it's a tough pill to swallow because both of these players seemed like ideal fits for addressing the Chargers' wide receiver needs. To be clear, it's not as though the wide receiver room is without options for improvement. There are still opportunities out there, but players like Metcalf and Adams presented the chance to secure a true Pro Bowl caliber wide receiver, someone with that ideal X-receiver profile, capable of playing on the outside and complementing the existing talent on the roster. Now, the attention likely turns to other names, such as Darius Slayton, or perhaps leaning more heavily on Keenan Allen and Mike Williams. While these are solid options, they don't quite bring the same level of excitement or inspire the same confidence among fans as Metcalf or Adams would have. Looking at what's left, the situation isn't exactly ideal. There are still receivers who could contribute, either as a strong WR2 or as depth behind players like Ladd McConkey. The question, though, is how much of an upgrade they'd actually provide. Take T. Higgins, for instance. If the Bengals don't decide to trade him or prioritize other moves over keeping him, he's likely off the table. That leaves names like Chris Godwin, who's coming off a season-ending ankle injury. His projected value is around $20 million per year, and it could climb even higher. Then there's Amari Cooper, with projections closer to $15 million annually. Other big names like Stephon Diggs, DeAndre Hopkins, and A.J. Brown are being floated around, but those scenarios seem far less realistic. The most commonly mentioned name at this point is Darius Slayton. Slayton and Cooper fit the profile of outside receivers who wouldn't break the bank. Neither is a flawless option. Cooper's age and Slayton's inconsistency over recent seasons are notable drawbacks, but both could be logical additions. At the end of the day, it's about evaluating the available options and deciding what kind of move, if any, the Chargers will make. I still believe the Chargers are likely to sign someone before the draft. It might be a name like Slayton or Cooper, paired with a low-risk veteran on a bargain deal, something similar to what DJ Chark represented last year. That kind of move feels both practical and likely at this point. Now, here's another question nobody really wants to address, but it's worth asking. Do the Chargers genuinely see Quentin Johnston as that guy? The simple answer is no. Let me explain. What does that guy even mean in this context? If we're talking about someone like Darius Slayton, the expectation would be around 800 to 1,000 yards a season. Can Johnston hit those numbers? Sure, it's possible. He recorded about 760 yards last year, so reaching 800 wouldn't be a shock. But when it comes to being a go-to player or a cornerstone for the team, the answer appears to be no. Games like the one against the Texans and several others, excluding that Raiders finale, highlighted his limitations. He struggles with handling contact and hasn't shown enough in the intermediate and short-range game to suggest he can consistently deliver at a high level. That said, Johnston still has value as a third or fourth option who can make the occasional big play. The key now is finding the right role for him. It's a bit like how Baltimore handled Rashad Bateman. A different situation, sure, but they were patient, working to carve out a role for him despite limited early production. This brings up another question. If this regime doesn't prioritize wide receivers as much as other teams, does that limit Herbert's potential to achieve the statistical peaks of players like Mahomes, Allen, or Burrow? And if so, why pay Herbert such a massive contract? It's a fair concern. It's also a common criticism when considering someone like Jim Harbaugh, whose teams historically haven't placed heavy emphasis on wide receivers. That doesn't mean the position is ignored, though. The Chargers did trade up for Johnston, showing they're willing to invest some capital, even if it's not a lot compared to other teams. As for why you pay Herbert, the reasoning is straightforward. If you're not going to heavily invest in receivers, you need a quarterback capable of elevating mid-tier talent. That's precisely what Herbert brings to the table. And honestly, I agree with that logic. Besides, the deal is already done. Herbert's being paid like one of the league's elite quarterbacks because his regular season performance warrants it. Sure, the playoff loss left plenty to critique, but over the long term, his value to the team is undeniable. I wouldn't necessarily say this regime doesn't value wide receivers, it's more about how far they're willing to go to secure them. They've shown they can draft successfully, as we've seen with Ladd, and they've demonstrated a knack for finding in-season replacements on the waiver wire when injuries crop up. To their credit, they did a solid job patching those holes last year. It's not that they're unwilling to make a big move for a wide receiver. If the right opportunity presented itself, like a free agent explicitly wanting to join the team, or a trade where someone like DK Metcalf became available at a bargain, they might take that shot. But compared to other teams, they don't seem to place the same premium on the position. That said, the Chargers aren't at the level of the Ravens, where the rest of the roster is so dominant that the receiving core can afford to be a patchwork group. They're not in a position to rely on a mix of players like Zay Flowers and Rashad Bateman to consistently carry the load. There's still work to be done to build the kind of balance that lets them succeed without needing a marquee wide receiver. So, guys, what do you think? Who should the Chargers sign to fill this gap? Share your thoughts in the comment section.